r/pettyrevenge neighbor insulted me to my boss about property lines, so I ruined him. Neighbor insulted me to my boss about property lines, so I ruined him. I was sitting in my boss's office last Tuesday, watching my chances at the senior project manager promotion evaporate in real time, when Richard Chin dropped the bombshell that would change everything. Look, I'm going to be direct with you, Richard said, leaning back in his leather chair. We've received some concerning information about your attention to detail. Your ability to respect boundaries and follow regulations. My stomach dropped. I'd been with the firm for 6 years, had a spotless record, and was 3 weeks away from what should have been a slam dunk promotion. I'm sorry, what? What information? Someone called our main line. Said they were a concerned neighbor. Claimed you've been encroaching on property lines, letting your yard spill over onto other people's land. That you're irresponsible with property management. Richard's fingers drummed against his desk. In our line of work, if you can't manage your own property boundaries. The words hit like a physical blow. I work for Henderson & Associates, a commercial development firm where precision and regulatory compliance aren't just important, they're everything. A reputation for sloppy property management could kill my career. That's absolutely not true, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Who called? What did they say exactly? Richard waved his hand dismissively. Anonymous tip. But they seem to know a lot of details about your address, your work schedule. Look, I'm not saying we believe it completely, but it's raised some red flags. Maybe this promotion should wait until. Richard, I need you to understand something. I have a degree in urban planning. I literally do property surveys for fun. My boundaries are cleaner than a surgical suite. But I could see it in his eyes. The doubt was already planted. I drove home that afternoon with my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. 6 years of perfect performance reviews, and some anonymous caller nearly torched my promotion in a 10-minute phone conversation. But who would do this? Who even knew where I worked? Then it hit me like a freight train, Gerald Morrison. My neighbor of 8 years. The same Gerald who'd been giving me increasingly hostile looks over our shared fence line. The same Gerald who'd made passive-aggressive comments about my vegetable garden being awfully close to the property line. 3 months ago, Gerald had suggested I get a survey done to make sure we're all on the same page about boundaries. I'd laughed it off, thinking he was just being neurotic. I should have paid attention to the calculating look in his eyes when I told him where I worked. See, Gerald Morrison made one critical mistake. He picked a fight with someone who knows exactly how to research property records, who has friends at the city zoning office, and who just happens to have access to the most comprehensive database of building permits and code violations in a county. If Gerald wanted to play games with property lines and regulations, I was about to show him what a real professional looks like. That night, I pulled up the county assessor's website and started digging into Gerald's property history. What I found in those first 10 minutes of research made me smile for the first time since sitting in Richard's office. Gerald Morrison, it turned out, had been very, very busy making his own improvements over the years. And he'd been remarkably sloppy about following the proper procedures. This was going to be fun. The county assessor's database was a goldmine, but what I found that first night was just the appetizer. Gerald had pulled exactly 3 permits in the 8 years I'd lived next door, one for a basic fence repair, one for a water heater replacement, and one for a small deck addition in 2019. The problem? I could see at least 6 major modifications to his property from my second-floor window alone. I grabbed my laptop and started cross-referencing aerial photos from Google Earth, going back year by year. The progression was beautiful in its obviousness. 2018, standard backyard. 2020, massive pergola structure that definitely wasn't on any permit. 2022, what looked like a completely enclosed sunroom addition on the back of his house. 2023, elaborate outdoor kitchen setup that had to include electrical and gas lines. But the real smoking gun came when I overlaid the property survey data with the current satellite imagery. That gorgeous sunroom Gerald was so proud of. It was sitting pretty much entirely in what should have been the city easement. I was still riding the high of my discoveries when my phone buzzed with a text from my coworker Maya, heard about the promotion delay. That sucks. What happened? Word travels fast in our office. Richard had probably already mentioned it to the other partners. My professional reputation was getting damaged in real time while Gerald Morrison slept peacefully in his unpermitted sunroom. But my satisfaction was short-lived. The next morning brought a new problem. I was checking my mailbox when I noticed Gerald's wife, Patricia, standing in their driveway with someone I didn't recognize, a woman in a business suit holding a clipboard and camera. They were pointing at our shared fence line and taking photos. My blood ran cold when I saw the woman's jacket, Hamilton County Code Enforcement. Gerald had escalated. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I watched Patricia gesture animatedly toward my vegetable garden, which sits a good 4 feet from the property line on my side. The code enforcement officer was taking notes and photos. Patricia handed her what looked like printed documents. 20 minutes later, Gerald himself emerged and walked directly to our shared fence. He made a show of measuring something with a tape measure while the officer watched. Whatever he was telling her, it involved a lot of pointing in my direction. I felt like I was watching my life get attacked in slow motion. Gerald wasn't just content with sabotaging my promotion, he was building an official case against me with the county. After they left, I spent an hour researching the code enforcement officer's name from her jacket. Linda Vasquez, 15 years with the county, known for being thorough and by the book. If Gerald had convinced her to open a formal investigation, I'd have county officials crawling all over my property within the week. That afternoon, I got the call I'd been dreading. This is Linda Vasquez with Hamilton County Code Enforcement. I'm calling regarding a formal complaint we've received about potential property line violations at your address. We'll need to schedule an inspection within the next 5 business days. My hands were shaking as I took down the details. Whatever Gerald had told them, it was serious enough to trigger a formal investigation. An investigation that my employer would inevitably hear about if it escalated. In our industry, getting tagged with property violations was career suicide. I stared out my window at Gerald's house, at his beautiful unpermitted sunroom gleaming in the afternoon sun, at his elaborate outdoor kitchen that definitely wasn't up to code, at his pergola structure that I was now 90% certain was encroaching on city easement. Gerald Morrison had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He'd forced me to go from amateur property detective to full-scale offensive operations. Time to make some calls to my friends at the zoning office. I called my old college roommate Jake first. He'd been working at the Hamilton County zoning office for 12 years, climbing his way up to senior inspector. We'd kept in touch over beers and barbecues, and he owed me a favor from when I'd helped him navigate the permit process for his own home renovation. "Jake, it's about time I cashed in that favor you owe me," I said when he picked up. "Finally. What do you need? Please tell me it's not about fast-tracking a permit, because you know I can't." "Nothing like that. I need information. My neighbor at 847 Maple Street has been making my life hell, and I have reason to believe he's got some serious code violations. Can you pull his file?" The sound of typing filled the pause. "Gerald Morrison. Oh man, you're his neighbor. We've been watching that property for months." My heart nearly stopped. "What do you mean, watching it?" "We get complaints. Anonymous tips about unpermitted construction. But every time we schedule an inspection, somehow Morrison gets advance warning and calls to reschedule. Claims family emergencies, work conflicts, you name it. Guy's slippery as hell. Jake, he just sicked code enforcement on me. Had them out taking pictures and measurements this morning. Whatever game he's playing, he's trying to drag me down with him. That son of a..." Jake caught himself. "Sorry. Look, I shouldn't be telling you this, but Morrison's been playing the system. He's got someone tipping him off about inspections. We think he's paying off someone in the scheduling department." The pieces clicked into place. Gerald wasn't just violating codes, he was actively corrupting the system to avoid consequences. Meanwhile, he was weaponizing that same system against me. How can someone with a file full of complaints just skate by while I'm getting hit with an immediate investigation? Different departments, different procedures. Code enforcement responds fast to neighbor complaints. Our zoning investigations take longer to build. But listen, Jake's voice dropped to a whisper. "If you can get me solid evidence of active violations, photos with timestamps, maybe some documentation of the corruption angle, I can fast-track an emergency inspection. The kind he can't postpone." After hanging up with Jake, I felt the first spark of hope I'd had in days. But it was short-lived. My phone rang an hour later. Richard's name on the caller ID made my stomach clench. "We need to talk," Richard said without preamble. "My office. First thing Monday morning." "Richard, if this is about the neighbor situation, I can explain. It's not just about the neighbor anymore. I got a call from Hamilton County. Apparently, there's an active code enforcement investigation at your address. Our insurance carrier specifically excludes coverage for employees under regulatory investigation." The words hit like a punch to the gut. "You're suspending me. I'm protecting the firm. Until this gets resolved, you're on unpaid administrative leave. I'm sorry, but I can't have this kind of liability exposure." I stared at my phone after Richard hung up. In less than a week, Gerald had managed to destroy my promotion prospects and get me suspended from work. My mortgage payment was due in 3 weeks, and without my salary, I'd be cutting things dangerously close. But Gerald had made one crucial error in his campaign against me. He'd given me nothing left to lose, and all the time in the world to focus on taking him down. I spent the rest of Friday afternoon setting up surveillance equipment I'd ordered online, trail cameras with night vision, a telephoto lens for my DSLR, and a drone with 4K recording capability. If Gerald wanted a war over property lines and regulations, he was about to learn what total warfare looked like. Monday morning, while he thought I was safely at work, his real education would begin. Monday morning at 7 a.m., I watched from my kitchen window as Gerald left for work in his silver BMW. Patricia had already gone, she worked some kind of early shift at the hospital. Perfect. I gave it 15 minutes to make sure neither of them doubled back, then grabbed my equipment bag and headed outside. The trail cameras went up first, one positioned to capture Gerald's sunroom and its relationship to the property line, another focused on his outdoor kitchen setup, and a third aimed at that massive pergola structure. The drone footage was even better than I'd hoped. From 50 feet up, it was crystal clear that Gerald's sunroom extended well into what should have been city easement. The outdoor kitchen was positioned suspiciously close to what I was pretty sure was the gas line easement. And that pergola. It was definitely encroaching on the neighbor's property on his other side, the Hendersons, who traveled for work and probably had no idea. I was downloading the drone footage when my phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Heard you're on leave. This is such bullshit. Want me to do some digging on my end?" Maya worked in our contracts department and had access to all kinds of municipal databases through her work. More importantly, she was dating someone in the county clerk's office. I called her immediately. "Maya, I need to ask you something, and I need you to keep this completely confidential." "Of course. What's going on?" "My neighbor has been systematically destroying my career, and I'm pretty sure he's been bribing someone to avoid code enforcement. Can your boyfriend look up inspection records? Specifically, I need to know who's been handling Gerald Morrison's file and if there are any irregularities in the scheduling." "Jesus. Yeah, Marcus can access those records. Give me an hour." While I waited, I decided to do some old-fashioned detective work. I walked the property line with my surveyor's measuring wheel, documenting every inch. My vegetable garden was a full 4 feet inside my property line, exactly where it was supposed to be. But Gerald's sunroom? I measured it 3 times to be sure. It was 18 inches into the city easement, and the concrete foundation looked like it might be impacting the storm drain system. Maya called back with information that made my blood boil. Marcus pulled Gerald Morrison's file. Get this, he's had 11 scheduled inspections over the past 2 years. 11. And every single one has been postponed or rescheduled at the last minute. The inspector assigned to his case. Some guy named Tony Breslin who, according to Marcus, has been flagged by internal affairs for irregular scheduling patterns. Meaning Tony Breslin is probably taking bribes to give advance warning about inspections. Marcus says there's already an internal investigation building. They just need more evidence. I felt pieces clicking together in my mind. Maya, can Marcus find out if Tony Breslin has handled any other cases in my neighborhood? Hold on. I heard muffled conversation in the background. Marcus says yeah, Breslin's been the inspector for your entire zip code for the past 3 years. He's handled maybe 40 cases in that area. And how many of those resulted in actual violations or fines? More muffled conversation. Holy shit. 3. Out of 40 cases, only 3 resulted in citations. And all 3 were for people who couldn't afford to pay bribes, elderly residents, renters, people with obvious financial hardships. The scope of Gerald's corruption was bigger than I'd imagined. He wasn't just paying off one inspector, he'd apparently found the one corrupt official who could protect his entire neighborhood scheme. But Maya wasn't done. Marcus also pulled the complaint that triggered your investigation. Want to know what Gerald told them? Hit me. He claimed you've been running an illegal home business out of your garage, that you're storing hazardous materials in violation of residential zoning, and that your agricultural activities are attracting vermin that pose a health hazard. Oh, and that you've been harassing elderly neighbors and threatening property damage. I sat down hard on my back steps. Gerald hadn't just complained about property lines, he'd painted me as some kind of dangerous criminal operating an illegal business. No wonder code enforcement had responded so quickly. There's more, Maya continued. Gerald provided photographic evidence and testimony from concerned neighbors. He's been planning this for months. My phone beeped with an incoming call. Linda Vasquez from Code Enforcement. Maya, I have to go. The inspector's calling. Wait, one more thing. Marcus says if you can get solid evidence of Tony Breslin taking bribes, the county will fast-track investigations on every property he's been protecting. They're looking for a way to clean house. I answered Vasquez's call with my heart pounding. Mr. Peterson, I need to inform you that we're escalating your case. Based on the evidence provided, we'll be conducting a comprehensive inspection tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Please ensure someone is available to provide access to all areas of your property, including your garage and any outbuildings. The net was closing around me, while Gerald sat protected by his corrupt inspector. But now I knew exactly how deep his corruption went. Time to burn it all down. That evening, I was reviewing my drone footage when I noticed something that made me grab my binoculars. Gerald was in his backyard with another man I didn't recognize, middle-aged, wearing a county vehicle windbreaker, carrying what looked like an inspection tablet. Tony Breslin. Had to be. I watched them walk the property line, with Gerald pointing animatedly at my house while Breslin took notes. They spent nearly 20 minutes examining Gerald's sunroom, but instead of measuring its proximity to the easement, they were looking at how it aligned with my property. Gerald handed Breslin an envelope, not even trying to hide it. I grabbed my phone and started recording through the telephoto lens. The video quality was good enough to see Breslin pocket the envelope before they shook hands. Gerald was literally paying off the inspector in plain sight, probably feeling completely safe because he thought I was at work. But as I watched them, something else caught my attention. A white sedan parked across the street that I didn't recognize. Someone was sitting in the driver's seat, also watching Gerald's backyard through what looked like binoculars. My blood ran cold. If code enforcement was running surveillance on my property while Gerald was bribing their inspector 50 feet away, this whole situation was about to explode in ways I hadn't anticipated. I called Jake immediately. Jake, I need you to listen carefully. Tony Breslin is at my neighbor's house right now, and I just watched Gerald hand him what looked like a bribe. But there's someone else here running surveillance. Is your department working with internal affairs on this? Shit. Yeah, they've been building a case against Breslin for months. If you witnessed a bribe, that's exactly what they need. But listen, if internal affairs is watching, that means tomorrow's inspection of your property is probably a setup. What do you mean? Think about it. They let Breslin handle your case even though they know he's corrupt. They're probably hoping he'll do something obviously illegal during your inspection that they can catch on record. Your bait. The realization hit like a sledgehammer. The county was using my livelihood as ammunition in their internal affairs investigation. They were willing to let my career get destroyed if it meant catching one corrupt inspector. Jake, I can't be bait. I'm already suspended from work. If tomorrow's inspection goes badly, I could lose everything. I know. Look, send me that video of the bribe. Tonight. I'm going to make some calls and see if we can force their hand. After I hung up, I noticed the white sedan was gone. But now there was a different car parked 2 houses down, a gray Honda with tinted windows. Whoever was watching wasn't trying very hard to be subtle. My phone rang at 9:30 p.m. Unknown number. Peterson. This is Detective Sarah Chen with County Internal Affairs. We need to talk. My heart nearly stopped. About what? About what you saw tonight in your neighbor's backyard. About the video footage you sent to Jake Morrison. About the fact that you're scheduled for an inspection tomorrow morning with an inspector we're investigating. How did you? Jake called us. Look, Mr. Peterson, you've stumbled into the middle of a corruption investigation that's been 18 months in the making. Gerald Morrison isn't just paying off Tony Breslin, he's part of a whole network. Construction contractors, zoning officials, even some city council members. The scope kept getting bigger. So what happens to me tomorrow? That depends. We can pull the inspection, but it'll look suspicious and might spook our targets. Or you can let it proceed and help us gather evidence. If Breslin tries to fabricate violations or demands payment to make your problems disappear, we'll have everything we need. And if he finds some technical violation and destroys my career anyway, then we'll make sure the charges get dismissed and your employer knows the whole thing was part of a corruption sting. But I won't lie to you, there's risk involved. I stared out my window at Gerald's house, thinking about my suspended job, my upcoming mortgage payment, and the fact that this man had tried to destroy my life over a property line dispute. Detective Chen, if I help you tomorrow, what happens to Gerald Morrison? If we can prove he's been bribing officials and filing false reports. We're talking conspiracy charges, fraud, potentially RICO violations if the network is big enough. He's looking at serious prison time. I thought about Gerald's smug face when he'd measured fake property violations for the code enforcement officer. About my boss questioning my integrity. About sitting in my house on unpaid leave while my reputation crumbled. What do you need me to do? Detective Chen's plan was elegant in its simplicity, but terrifying in its implications. I would wear a wire during tomorrow's inspection, act naturally, and see if Tony Breslin tried to shake me down or fabricate violations. If he took the bait, they'd have him dead to rights. One problem, I told her during our midnight briefing in a 24-hour diner 3 miles from my house. What if Gerald shows up? He's been orchestrating this whole thing, there's no way he'll just sit at work while his pet inspector handles me. Detective Chen smiled grimly. We're counting on it. Gerald doesn't know we're onto him yet. If he shows up and tries to influence Breslin's inspection, we'll have conspiracy charges locked down. At 6 a.m., I was pacing my kitchen when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hope you're ready for today. Time to face the music. A concerned neighbor. Gerald. The arrogant bastard was taunting me, probably thinking I'd cave and offer him some kind of settlement to make this go away. If he only knew I was about to help send him to federal prison. The wire they'd given me was smaller than I'd expected, just a tiny device taped under my shirt collar. Detective Chen had positioned 3 surveillance teams around my neighborhood, disguised as utility workers and delivery drivers. From my perspective, it looked like a normal Tuesday morning. At 8:45, Tony Breslin's county vehicle pulled into my driveway. He was exactly what central casting would order for a corrupt inspector, overweight, cheap suit, the kind of mustache that screamed, I take bribes. But what made my blood pressure spike was seeing Gerald's BMW pull up behind him. Gerald got out of his car like he owned the place, carrying a thick folder and wearing the most satisfied expression I'd ever seen. He'd taken time off work to personally witness my destruction. Mr. Peterson, Breslin said, not bothering to hide his disdain. I'm here to conduct a comprehensive inspection of your property. This is Mr. Morrison, he'll be observing as the complainant. I forced myself to stay calm. Of course. Where would you like to start? The garage, Gerald said immediately. We need to document the illegal business operations. Breslin nodded. Lead the way. Walking toward my garage, I caught sight of a utility truck down the street. Detective Chen's team was in position. The wire felt like it was burning against my skin. My garage was immaculate, I'd spent Monday evening organizing every tool and storage bin. But Gerald walked straight to my workbench where I kept my surveying equipment and pointed dramatically. There, he announced to Breslin. Commercial-grade surveying tools. He's clearly running a consulting business out of residential property. Breslin dutifully photographed my level and measuring wheel. Mr. Peterson, do you conduct business activities from this location? I use those tools for personal property maintenance, I said carefully. Same way someone might own a lawnmower. Gerald's face flushed. That's $1,000 laser level. Nobody buys that for personal use. Actually, I said, unable to resist, it was $800. I got it on sale when I was doing my own property survey. You know, to make sure I wasn't encroaching on any easements or property lines. The dig hit home. Gerald's jaw tightened, but Breslin was already moving toward the back door. Let's examine the agricultural violations, Breslin said. We walked to my vegetable garden, for raised beds positioned exactly where my survey had indicated they should be. Gerald pulled out a measuring tape with theatrical precision. See how close these are to the property line, he said to Breslin. This creates drainage issues, pest problems, property value impacts. Breslin nodded and started taking photos. But something was off about his positioning, he was angling the shots to make my garden look closer to the fence than it actually was. Mr. Peterson, Breslin said, consulting his tablet, I'm seeing potential zoning violations here. Residential properties aren't permitted for agricultural use of this scale. For small vegetable beds. I asked. That's not agriculture, that's gardening. The county defines agricultural activity as any organized cultivation intended to produce food products, Breslin recited. This exceeds normal residential gardening. Gerald was practically glowing. We're also concerned about the composting operation attracting vermin. I looked at my small compost bin, a standard tumbler that thousands of homeowners used. That's a closed composting system. It doesn't attract pests. Nevertheless, Breslin said, making notes, I'm documenting multiple violations. Agricultural use in residential zoning, unpermitted soil modification, potential drainage impacts. My hands were starting to shake with rage, but I forced myself to remember the wire. Detective Chen needed evidence of corruption, not a recording of me losing my temper. What kind of fines are we looking at? I asked. Gerald and Breslin exchanged a look. This was the moment Chen had prepared me for. Well, Breslin said slowly, violations of this magnitude typically result in significant penalties. Could be looking at several $1,000s, mandatory remediation, possible legal action. He paused, studying my face. Of course, sometimes these situations can be resolved more efficiently. There it was. The shakedown was beginning. What do you mean by resolved more efficiently? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady while the wire recorded every word. Breslin glanced around nervously, then stepped closer. Look, Mr. Peterson, I've been doing this for 15 years. Sometimes we can work out arrangements that benefit everyone involved. A small consultation fee to help navigate the appeals process, maybe some guidance on how to reframe these violations. Gerald was watching this exchange with barely contained glee, but something in Breslin's tone seemed to make him uncomfortable. The inspector was being more direct about the bribe than Gerald had probably expected. How small of a consultation fee are we talking about? I asked. For violations of this scope. Usually around 3,000 covers it. Cash, of course. Processing fees, you understand. My stomach churned, but I could practically hear Detective Chen cheering through the wire. Breslin had just explicitly solicited a bribe with Gerald Morrison standing 3 feet away. That seems like a lot of money, I said carefully. Gerald stepped forward. It's a lot less than fighting this through official channels. Trust me, I've seen how these cases go. The county doesn't mess around with zoning violations. But as Gerald spoke, I noticed Breslin shooting him warning looks. Something was wrong with their dynamic. Gerald was being too eager, too obvious. Even for a corrupt inspector, this had to feel dangerously transparent. Maybe we should discuss this more privately, Breslin said, eyeing Gerald with clear irritation. That's when I realized the flaw in Detective Chen's plan. Gerald wasn't just a client paying bribes, he was a loose cannon who might blow Breslin's entire operation by being too obvious about the corruption. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Jake's number. Excuse me, I said, stepping away to answer. Don't say my name, Jake said urgently. Internal Affairs just called. There's a problem. Gerald Morrison filed a second complaint this morning, about you conducting surveillance on his property. He's claiming harassment, invasion of privacy, stalking behavior. My blood went cold. Gerald had spotted my drone surveillance. He's got photos of your equipment, timestamps, the whole thing, Jake continued. IA is worried this compromises the sting operation. If Gerald can prove you were spying on him, it makes you look like the aggressor. I looked back at Gerald and Breslin, who were having what appeared to be a heated whispered conversation near my compost bin. Gerald kept gesturing toward his house, while Breslin kept shaking his head. There's more, Jake said. Gerald's lawyer called the county this morning threatening a lawsuit against you personally for harassment and against the county for allowing a vendetta investigation to proceed. They're demanding Breslin be removed from your case. The pieces clicked together in my mind. Gerald wasn't just trying to destroy me, he was trying to protect Breslin by getting him removed before he could be caught taking bribes. Gerald had figured out that Internal Affairs was watching. Jake, how would Gerald know about the investigation unless someone tipped him off? Yeah. IA thinks there's a leak in the department. I hung up and walked back toward Breslin and Gerald, my mind racing. If Gerald knew about the sting, then this whole inspection was theater. But what was his endgame? Sorry about that, I said. Work emergency. Gerald smiled coldly. I thought you were suspended. The comment hit like a slap. Gerald wasn't just showing off, he was letting me know exactly how much he knew about my situation. But his smugness was about to cost him everything. You know what, Mr. Breslin? I said, loud enough to ensure the wire picked up every word. I think Mr. Morrison is right. $3,000 cash is a small price to pay to make this go away. When can we arrange the payment? Gerald's face went white. Breslin looked like he'd been punched. And somewhere in the distance, I heard a car door slam as Detective Chen's team moved into position. The trap was closing, but I was no longer sure who was the hunter and who was the prey. Breslin's face went through about 5 different shades of panic as my words hung in the air. Gerald looked like he'd swallowed his tongue. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before Breslin finally found his voice. Mr. Peterson, I think there's been a misunderstanding, he stammered, backing away from me. I wasn't suggesting any kind of payment. I was discussing official appeals processes through proper channels. But the damage was done. I'd forced him to either accept the bribe on tape or abandon the shakedown entirely. Gerald was staring at Breslin with naked fury. Clearly this wasn't how their plan was supposed to unfold. Really? I pressed, stepping closer. Because it sounded like you were offering to help me avoid these violations for a consultation fee. Cash payment. Wasn't that what you said? I said no such thing, Breslin snapped, his demeanor shifting completely. Mr. Morrison, I think we're done here. I'll be filing my report with the county by end of business today. Gerald's carefully orchestrated plan was falling apart in real time. Wait, Inspector Breslin, shouldn't we finish documenting the violations? The drainage issues, the property line problems. But Breslin was already walking toward his vehicle, clearly spooked. I've seen enough. Mr. Peterson, you'll receive official notice of violations within 5 business days. Good day. As Breslin's county vehicle pulled out of my driveway, Gerald turned on me with unconcealed rage. What the hell was that about? Why would you offer him money? That's bribery. The irony was so thick I almost laughed. You're lecturing me about bribery. You literally handed him an envelope in your backyard yesterday. Gerald's face went completely white. I have no idea what you're talking about. Really? Because I've got it on video. High-definition drone footage of you paying off a county inspector. How do you think that's going to play with Internal Affairs? For the first time since this whole nightmare began, Gerald looked genuinely frightened. You've been spying on me. That's illegal surveillance. I'll have you arrested for stalking. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone, let me show you something interesting I discovered while researching property records. I pulled up the aerial photos I'd compiled. See this? Your sunroom is 18 inches into the city easement. This pergola. It's encroaching on the Hendersons' property. And this outdoor kitchen setup. I'm pretty sure those gas lines were installed without permits. Gerald's jaw worked silently as he stared at the images. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. What do you want? I want you to call my boss and tell him you made a mistake. That you were confused about the property lines and there's no issue with my property management. I want you to withdraw your complaint with code enforcement. And I want you to stay the hell away from me and my property. And if I don't? I smiled for the first time in days. Then I send my evidence package to the county prosecutor, the state attorney general's office, and every local news station in the city. How do you think your neighbors will react when they find out you've been running a bribery scheme while filing false complaints against them? Gerald stood there for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. But before he could respond, 2 more county vehicles pulled up to the curb. Detective Chen got out of one, followed by 3 men in suits I didn't recognize. Gerald Morrison, Chen called out, walking across my lawn with purpose. We need to have a conversation. Gerald's face cycled through confusion, panic, and finally resignation. I want a lawyer. That's your right, Chen replied. But you might want to hear what we found in Inspector Breslin's vehicle first. Turns out he's been keeping very detailed records of his side business. Including a ledger with your name, address, and payment history going back 3 years. My phone buzzed with a text from Richard, county called. Investigation dropped due to inspector misconduct. See you Monday for promotion discussion. As I watched Gerald get escorted to a county vehicle, his wife Patricia pulled into their driveway. The look of horror on her face when she saw her husband in handcuffs was almost enough to make me feel sorry for him. Almost. Detective Chen walked over as the scene began to wind down. Mr. Peterson, we're going to need a full statement, but I wanted to thank you. This investigation just broke open a corruption network involving 12 county employees and over 40 property owners. I looked at Gerald's house, with its beautiful unpermitted additions gleaming in the afternoon sun, soon to be the subject of very thorough and legitimate code enforcement action. Sometimes justice tastes better than revenge. The satisfaction of watching Gerald get arrested lasted exactly until Monday morning, when I walked into Henderson and Associates expecting to reclaim my career and found myself sitting across from Richard and two people I'd never seen before. This is Janet Morrison from our legal department and David Kim from HR, Richard said, his tone carefully neutral. We need to discuss the events of last week. My stomach dropped. I thought the county cleared everything up. The investigation was dropped due to inspector misconduct. Janet leaned forward, consulting a thick file. Mr. Peterson, while the criminal charges against you have been dismissed, we've discovered some concerning information about your conduct during this situation. She pulled out a series of photographs that made my blood freeze. They were shots of my house taken with a telephoto lens, images of me setting up surveillance equipment, operating the drone, and positioning trail cameras. The timestamps showed they'd been taken over several days. These were provided to us by Gerald Morrison's attorney, David from HR said. Along with documentation that you conducted unauthorized surveillance of a neighbor's property, potentially violating privacy laws and HOA regulations. Richard drummed his fingers on his desk. The optics are problematic. Even if your neighbor was corrupt, using surveillance equipment to spy on residential properties raises questions about your judgment and our firm's liability exposure. You're seriously taking the word of a man who just got arrested for bribery? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. We're taking the word of documented evidence, Janet replied coldly. Mr. Morrison's attorney has filed a civil suit against you for invasion of privacy, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. He's also named our firm as a defendant, claiming we should have known about your pattern of aggressive behavior. The room spun slightly. Gerald was still finding ways to destroy my career even from jail. Furthermore, David continued, our insurance carrier has informed us that employees engaged in surveillance activities outside their job duties create liability exposure we can't accept. Effective immediately, you're being transferred to our Portland office. Portland. That's 3,000 miles away. It's a lateral transfer, same salary and benefits, Richard said. But given the circumstances, it's the only way we can retain you as an employee. I stared at them in disbelief. You're forcing me to relocate because I defended myself against a criminal who tried to sabotage my career. We're protecting the firm, Janet said flatly. The transfer offer is on the table for 48 hours. After that, we'll have to consider termination for cause. Walking out of that conference room, I felt like I'd won the battle but lost the war. Gerald was in jail, but he'd still managed to uproot my entire life. The civil lawsuit meant months of legal bills I couldn't afford, and relocating to Portland would mean starting over completely. My phone rang as I sat in my car in the parking lot. Maya's name on the screen. How did it go? She asked. They're transferring me to Portland or firing me. Gerald's lawyer is suing everyone in sight. Jesus. Look, I've been doing some digging since you texted me about this morning's meeting. Gerald's attorney. His name is Marcus Webb. Ring any bells? Should it? Webb, Peterson, and Associates. Real estate law firm. They were sanctioned by the state bar 3 years ago for filing frivolous lawsuits to pressure settlements. And here's the interesting part, they specialize in representing clients in corruption cases. The implications hit me like a freight train. Gerald didn't just randomly find a lawyer. He hired specialists who know exactly how to weaponize the legal system. Gets better, Maya continued. I pulled Webb's client list. Half his cases in the past 2 years involved county employees or contractors who got caught in corruption stings. He's basically the go-to lawyer for the whole network Detective Chen was investigating. I closed my eyes, realizing how deep this conspiracy went. Gerald wasn't just paying off one inspector, he was part of an organized criminal enterprise with legal protection built in. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, Portland's nice this time of year. Enjoy the rain. A concerned neighbor. Gerald was still playing games, even from jail. But he'd just made his biggest mistake yet. That evening, I was packing boxes in my living room when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Detective Chen standing on my porch looking grim. We have a problem, she said the moment I opened the door. Gerald Morrison made bail this afternoon. My stomach lurched. How? I thought corruption charges carried high bail amounts. His lawyer argued that he was a low-flight risk with community ties. Posted bond 2 hours ago. Chen stepped inside, glancing around nervously. But that's not why I'm here. We intercepted some communications that suggest you might be in danger. She pulled out her phone and played an audio recording. Gerald's voice, distorted but recognizable, the Peterson problem needs a permanent solution. He's got too much evidence, and he's not backing down. Make it look like an accident. The blood drained from my face. He's planning to hurt me. We think so. This was recorded during a jailhouse call to someone we haven't identified yet. The number traces to a burner phone. Chen's expression was deadly serious. Mr. Peterson, these people aren't just corrupt officials taking small bribes. We're talking about a criminal organization that's moved millions of dollars through fake permits and construction schemes. They've got too much invested to let one witness destroy everything. I sank onto my couch, the weight of everything crashing down. So Gerald gets out of jail and immediately starts planning to have me killed, while his lawyer sues me into bankruptcy. Perfect. There's something else, Chen continued. We've been monitoring Gerald's house since his release. He's had visitors, people we don't recognize, driving vehicles with out-of-state plates. Professional-looking individuals who don't fit the profile of family or neighbors. My phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number, enjoying your evening at home. Might be your last peaceful night for a while. I showed Chen the message. Her face darkened. Pack a bag. Right now. We're moving you to a safe house until we can arrest the rest of the network. I can't just disappear. I have 48 hours to accept the Portland transfer or lose my job entirely. Your job won't matter if you're dead, Chen said bluntly. These people have already proven they'll destroy careers, bribe officials, and file fraudulent lawsuits. Physical violence is just the next escalation. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone rang. Richard's name appeared on the screen. Don't answer it, Chen warned, but I was already picking up. Peterson, Richard's voice was strained. I just got a very disturbing call. Someone claiming to represent Gerald Morrison called our main office, threatening to expose what he called Peterson's criminal surveillance activities to our biggest clients unless we terminate you immediately. Richard, Gerald Morrison is literally a criminal who was arrested for bribery. I know that. But his people are calling our clients directly. They're claiming you've been using company resources to conduct illegal surveillance, that we've been covering it up, that working with us exposes them to liability. We've already had 3 clients request meetings to discuss concerns about our employee vetting procedures. The room seemed to tilt. Gerald's organization wasn't just attacking me, they were going after my employer's entire client base, using my situation as ammunition to destroy the firm's reputation. What are you saying, Richard? I'm saying the Portland offer is off the table. Our board met in emergency session an hour ago. You're terminated, effective immediately. I'm sorry, but we can't survive this kind of coordinated attack on our business relationships. Detective Chen was watching my face as Richard delivered the death blow to my career. When I hung up, she shook her head grimly. Mr. Peterson, these people aren't just trying to silence you, they're systematically destroying every aspect of your life to send a message to other potential witnesses. We need to get you somewhere safe while we figure out how to fight back. Outside, a car engine started up. Through my window, I could see headlights in the darkness, someone sitting in a vehicle across the street. Gerald's people had found me. Detective Chen was already moving toward the window, hand on her radio, when my phone buzzed with another text, look outside. See the silver sedan. Wave hello. The audacity made my blood boil. Gerald's people weren't even trying to be subtle, they wanted me to know I was being watched. Alpha team, we have eyes on the target location, Chen spoke into her radio. Silver sedan, 2 occupants, positioned for surveillance. Request immediate backup. But as she coordinated with her team, my phone rang again. This time it was Jake from the zoning office. Don't go home tonight, he said without preamble. Tony Breslin made bail 3 hours ago, and he's been making calls. Word is spreading through the whole network that you're the witness who brought everything down. Jake, I am home. And Detective Chen is here telling me the same thing. Then get out. Now. Because Breslin's not just angry, he's desperate. We found records showing he's been taking bribes for 7 years. He's looking at federal prison time, and his lawyer is telling people that discrediting you is his only chance at a plea deal. Chen grabbed my arm. We need to move. My backup is still 10 minutes out, and that sedan just flashed its lights. They're signaling someone. As if on cue, another vehicle, a black SUV, turned onto my street from the opposite direction. The coordination was unmistakable. Gerald's people weren't just watching, they were positioning for something more aggressive. Back door, Chen said, drawing her weapon. Leave everything except essential documents and medication. We'll send a team back for your belongings later. I grabbed my laptop bag and the folder containing all my property research, then followed Chen through my kitchen toward the rear exit. But as we reached the back door, she held up a hand and peered through the blinds. Problem. There's a third vehicle in the alley behind your house. Black pickup truck, engine running. My phone buzzed with a call from Marcus Webb, Gerald's attorney. Against Chen's frantic head shaking, I answered. Mr. Peterson, Webb's voice was smooth and professional. I think there's been a serious misunderstanding that's escalating unnecessarily. My client would like to propose a resolution that benefits everyone involved. Your client is in jail for bribery, and his friends are surrounding my house. Those aren't my client's friends. Those are concerned citizens who believe you've been harassing their families with illegal surveillance. But I can make them go away if you're willing to be reasonable. The threat was barely veiled. Webb was basically admitting he could control the people watching my house, while pretending they were just concerned neighbors. What kind of resolution? I asked, stalling while Chen coordinated escape routes through her radio. A simple affidavit stating that you may have misinterpreted what you saw, that perhaps your surveillance equipment malfunctioned or captured misleading footage. In exchange, all civil litigation disappears, and these concerned citizens lose interest in your activities. Detective Chen was shaking her head violently, but I could see her team wasn't in position yet. The vehicles outside were holding steady, but their positioning suggested they could move quickly if needed. And if I refuse? Well, Webb's tone remained pleasant. I can't control what concerned citizens might do if they continue to believe their families are being threatened by illegal surveillance activities. Sometimes people take matters into their own hands when they feel law enforcement isn't protecting them adequately. The line went dead just as Detective Chen's radio crackled. Alpha team, suspect vehicles are mobile. They're repositioning to cover all exits from the target location. Chen looked at me grimly. Mr. Peterson, I hope you're ready for the fight of your life, because Gerald Morrison's people just made this a hostage situation. The standoff lasted exactly 47 minutes. I know because I watched every second tick by on my phone while crouched behind my kitchen island, listening to Detective Chen coordinate with tactical teams through her radio. Suspects have established a perimeter, came the crackling voice from her radio. Silver sedan blocking the front street, black SUV covering the east side, pickup in the rear alley. No movement, but engines are running. Chen looked at me grimly. They're not trying to break in. They're making sure you can't leave. Classic intimidation tactic, let you sit here wondering what comes next. My phone had been buzzing constantly with texts from unknown numbers. Nice house. Shame if something happened to it. Your homeowner's insurance current. Accidents happen when people don't mind their own business. But it was the call from my mortgage company that really drove home how thoroughly Gerald's network was dismantling my life. Mr. Peterson, this is Jennifer from Atlas Home Lending. We've received some concerning information about potential legal issues affecting your property. We need to discuss your loan terms immediately. I put the call on speaker so Chen could hear. What kind of legal issues? We've been contacted by an attorney representing concerned neighbors who claim your property is being used for illegal surveillance activities. Additionally, we've received documentation suggesting pending criminal charges related to harassment and stalking. Chen's jaw tightened. Gerald's lawyer was systematically contacting every institution in my life, poisoning the well before I could defend myself. There are no pending criminal charges, I said carefully. The county dropped their investigation due to inspector corruption. Nevertheless, our risk management department requires immediate clarification. If you're unable to provide satisfactory documentation within 24 hours, we'll be forced to accelerate your loan under the moral turpitude clause. The call ended, leaving me staring at Chen in disbelief. They can foreclose on my house because of accusations? If your mortgage contains a moral turpitude clause, technically yes. It's usually buried in a fine print, most people never read it. Chen's radio crackled again, perimeter vehicles have been joined by a fourth car. White van, no plates visible. My blood ran cold. 4 vehicles meant this wasn't just intimidation anymore, this was preparation for something bigger. But then my phone rang with a number I recognized, Maya. Don't say anything important, she said immediately. But Marcus found something huge. Gerald's lawyer made a mistake, he filed identical lawsuits against 3 other people in the past month. Same language, same claims, same intimidation pattern. Maya, this isn't the best time. Listen to me. The other victims are all witnesses in corruption cases. One of them is a city council member who got wind of the bribery network. Another is a contractor who refused to pay kickbacks. Gerald's not just targeting you, this is a systematic campaign to silence anyone who threatens their operation. Chen was listening intently, and I saw her eyes widen with understanding. Maya, can Marcus get this information to the FBI? Because I think we're looking at a federal conspiracy case, not just local corruption. Already done. Marcus has been in contact with federal agents for the past 2 hours. They're coordinating with local police for a simultaneous takedown of the entire network. Through my window, I could see the silver sedan's driver talking on a phone. Whatever was about to happen, the timeline was accelerating. Chen's radio erupted with urgent chatter, all units, federal task force is taking lead on this operation. Suspect vehicles are to be approached simultaneously in 3 minutes. My phone buzzed with one final text from Gerald's burner number, last chance to be smart about this. Check your email. The email contained a single document, a confession letter addressed to Detective Chen, admitting that I had fabricated evidence against Gerald Morrison due to a personal vendetta and apologizing for wasting police resources. All I had to do was sign it, and Gerald's people would disappear into the night. Chen looked at the document, then at me. Your choice, Mr. Peterson. But whatever you decide, decide fast. Outside, the FBI task force was 60 seconds from moving. I stared at the confession letter on my phone screen, my hands shaking with rage and adrenaline. Gerald wanted me to sign away my credibility, my integrity, everything I'd fought to preserve, all to save himself from federal prison. 30 seconds, Chen whispered into her radio, her weapon drawn as she watched the vehicles through my window. That's when my phone rang. Gerald Morrison himself. Pick it up, Chen nodded. Keep him talking. Enjoying your evening? Gerald's voice was different now, desperate, manic. Gone was the smug confidence he'd shown in my backyard just days ago. Gerald, you're making this worse for yourself. The FBI is involved now. This isn't just local corruption anymore. The FBI doesn't have shit, he screamed. Some photos and recordings from an obsessed neighbor conducting illegal surveillance. My lawyer will tear you apart in federal court. Through the window, I could see tactical officers in body armor moving through my neighbor's yards, positioning themselves behind the suspect vehicles. Gerald had no idea his intimidation squad was about to become a federal arrest operation. Gerald, listen to me. Your people are surrounding my house right now. That's kidnapping, conspiracy, probably terrorism charges. You're looking at decades in federal prison. Those aren't my people, he said, but his voice cracked. I don't know anything about vehicles around your house. Chen was recording the conversation, and Gerald had just made a critical error. He'd admitted knowledge of the surveillance without claiming responsibility, classic consciousness of guilt. Then call them off, I said. If you don't control them, how did your lawyer know to coordinate the intimidation campaign with the civil lawsuit? Silence on the line. In that moment, I could almost hear Gerald's mind working, realizing he'd walked into a trap. You think you're so smart, he finally said. But this goes deeper than you know. The people I work with don't just disappear because some federal agents show up. They have connections, resources. Even if I go down, they'll make sure you pay for destroying their operation. All units, execute. Chen's radio erupted with coordinated shouts. Through my windows, I watched synchronized chaos unfold. FBI agents swarmed all 4 vehicles simultaneously, tactical lights blazing, voices shouting commands. The silver sedan's driver tried to speed away but immediately crashed into a strategically positioned federal vehicle blocking the street. Gerald was still on the phone, apparently unaware his intimidation team was being arrested in real time. Gerald, I said, watching agents drag someone in handcuffs from the black SUV, your people just got taken down by a federal task force. Whatever leverage you thought you had just disappeared. The phone went silent except for heavy breathing. This isn't over, he finally whispered. You have no idea who you're really fighting. The line went dead just as Detective Chen's radio confirmed what I could see through my window, 4 vehicles secured, 7 suspects in custody, multiple weapons recovered. But Gerald's final words echoed in my mind. The fear in his voice suggested he wasn't just worried about prison, he was terrified of whoever else was involved in this conspiracy. Chen holstered her weapon as the immediate threat ended, but her expression remained grim. Mr. Peterson, what Gerald said about connections and resources. He's probably not bluffing. Taking down his intimidation squad doesn't end this. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya, Marcus found something. Gerald's operation has tentacles in the state attorney general's office. This goes way higher than county corruption. I stared out at the FBI agents processing the crime scene in my front yard, realizing that Gerald Morrison was just the beginning. Somewhere in the state capital, powerful people were probably making phone calls right now, deciding how to contain the damage from tonight's arrests. The war was far from over. The FBI's tactical operation was still winding down in my front yard when my phone started buzzing with calls from numbers I didn't recognize. The first few I ignored, but when the same area codes kept calling back repeatedly, Detective Chin nodded for me to answer one. Mr. Peterson. The voice was crisp, professional, with just a hint of a southern accent. This is Amanda Richardson, Chief of Staff for Attorney General Patricia Hawkins. We need to schedule an urgent meeting regarding your involvement in the Morrison investigation. My blood went cold. Maya had just texted that Gerald's network had connections in the AG's office, and now they were calling me directly while FBI agents were literally arresting Gerald's people in my driveway. I think any meeting should go through Detective Chen or the FBI task force, I said carefully. Mr. Peterson, I'm afraid you misunderstand the situation. The Attorney General's office has jurisdiction over certain aspects of this case that go beyond local corruption. We've identified significant irregularities in how this investigation has been conducted. Chen was listening intently, her face growing darker with each word. She motioned for me to keep Richardson talking while she called someone on her radio. What kind of irregularities? Unauthorized surveillance operations, potential entrapment issues, questions about the admissibility of evidence obtained through civilian interference in official investigations. Richardson's tone remained professional, but the threat was unmistakable. The Attorney General is concerned that overzealous prosecution might compromise legitimate cases against actual criminals. Through my window, I watched FBI agents loading evidence boxes from the arrested vehicles. Whatever Gerald's people had been planning tonight, they brought enough equipment to suggest something far more serious than intimidation. Ms. Richardson, Gerald Morrison and his associates were literally surrounding my house with armed individuals when your office called. Are you seriously suggesting the problem here is investigative overreach? I'm suggesting that citizens who take surveillance operations into their own hands, regardless of their motivations, create legal complications that benefit no one. Sometimes the best outcome is a negotiated resolution that protects all parties. Chin grabbed my arm and shook her head vigorously. Whatever she'd learned from her radio call, she was adamant that I not agree to any meetings with the AG's office. I'll need to consult with my attorney before scheduling anything, I said. Of course. But Mr. Peterson, I hope you understand that the Attorney General's office has broad authority over how cases like this are prosecuted. Cooperation with our review process tends to lead to more favorable outcomes for everyone involved. After Richardson hung up, Chen looked like she wanted to punch something. The state AG's office just called you directly while a federal operation was arresting people at your house. That's not normal procedure, that's damage control. Her radio crackled with an urgent message. Detective Chen, Federal Command needs you immediately. Priority 1. She looked at me grimly. Stay inside. Don't answer any more calls from unknown numbers. Don't agree to meet with anyone from the state government without federal supervision. She paused at my door. And Mr. Peterson, start thinking about whether you have somewhere safe you can stay for an extended period. Because if the Attorney General's office is making direct contact this quickly, Gerald's connections go higher than we thought. After Chen left to coordinate with the FBI, I sat in my living room watching the aftermath of the night's operation through my windows. 7 arrests, 4 vehicles impounded, enough evidence boxes to fill a federal van. But instead of feeling relieved, I felt more vulnerable than ever. My phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. The Attorney General is a reasonable woman. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Gerald's network was still active, still making moves, even with their intimidation squad in federal custody. And now they had officials from the state government trying to pressure me into backing down. I stared at Gerald's house across the street, dark and empty with him back in jail, and realized that taking him down might have been the easy part. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in a federal courthouse watching Gerald Morrison's entire world collapse in real time. The FBI's investigation had moved with lightning speed once they realized the scope of the conspiracy, and today was the day everything came together. The defendant Gerald Morrison, U.S. Attorney Sarah Chin announced to the packed courtroom, was not just paying bribes to local inspectors. Evidence shows he was part of a criminal enterprise that defrauded taxpayers of over $12 million through fake permits, inflated contracts, and systematic corruption of public officials. I watched Gerald's face from the gallery as the prosecutor laid out the case. Gone was the smug neighbor who tried to destroy my career over a property line dispute. The man sitting at the defendant's table looked broken, defeated, staring at his hands while his expensive lawyer frantically took notes. Furthermore, Attorney Chen continued, when Citizen Peterson threatened to expose this network, the defendants engaged in witness intimidation, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, and obstruction of justice. Phone records show Gerald Morrison coordinating with co-conspirators to permanently solve the Peterson problem. The federal investigation had uncovered everything. Tony Breslin's detailed bribery ledgers. Bank records showing payments flowing through shell companies. Communications between Gerald and officials at the state attorney general's office, including the woman who tried to pressure me into backing down. Maya squeezed my arm from the seat beside me. Look at the state officials, she whispered. I turned to see Amanda Richardson, the AG's chief of staff who'd called me that night, sitting in handcuffs in the row behind Gerald. Next to her sat 2 other state employees I didn't recognize, all facing federal corruption charges. The FBI had been recording every call, monitoring every attempt to interfere with their investigation. The defendant Morrison's actions weren't just criminal, the prosecutor continued, they were an attack on the fundamental principle that citizens have a right to report corruption without fear of retaliation. Mr. Peterson nearly lost his job, his home, and his safety because he refused to be intimidated. Judge Harrison called for a brief recess before sentencing, and that's when I got the call I'd been waiting for. Peterson. This is Richard. I owe you the biggest apology in the history of corporate America. My former boss sounded genuinely shaken. The FBI had briefed Henderson and Associates about the conspiracy, explaining how Gerald's network had systematically targeted the firm's clients to force my termination. Richard, I appreciate that, but... No, let me finish. The board met yesterday. We're not just offering you your job back, we're promoting you to senior project manager with a 20% salary increase. And the firm is considering a civil suit against Gerald Morrison's estate for the damages he caused to our business relationships. I looked across the courtroom at Gerald, who was staring at me with something that might have been regret. Too little, too late. When court reconvened, Judge Harrison delivered the sentences that made headlines across the state. Gerald Morrison, 15 years federal prison, full restitution of stolen funds. Tony Breslin, 12 years, lifetime ban from public employment. Amanda Richardson, 8 years, disbarment proceedings pending. But the real victory came 3 hours later, when I was standing in my backyard looking at my perfectly legal vegetable garden. Detective Chen had called to tell me that Gerald's civil lawsuit had been dismissed with prejudice, and his lawyer was facing sanctions for filing frivolous litigation. My phone buzzed with one final text from Gerald's old number, but this time it was from Patricia Morrison. I'm sorry for everything Gerald put you through. The house is going up for sale next week. I hope you'll be happier with whoever moves in next. I deleted the message and went back to watering my tomatoes. The property line dispute that started this whole nightmare seemed absurd now. My vegetables were exactly where they'd always been, 4 feet inside my boundary line. Sometimes the best revenge really is just living well.